Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Really excited to be here today with Xander van Baarsen. I probably pronounced that incorrectly, maybe not, I don't know. But
Quite
he's from
nicely.
Rhino. Rhino has been a partner of the Smart Building Collective for a little bit more than a year now, and um, we have recently issued their solution certification. So they recently went through the solution certification program. And what's really wonderful about that is that it gives us a front row seat, an idea of exactly what they're doing from a technology perspective, but also from an organizational perspective. And then it's much easier for us to support them in all of the different activities that they're trying to accomplish. Finding customers, finding partners, helping them navigate the space of smart building, and we do that together as a collective. But Rhino is a really specific technology. It's a specific solution that we're going to dive into today. Everything about utility management. So how do we do smart utility management differently than we have in the past? And how do we make sure that we're getting the most out of that data and optimizing these buildings as much as possible? And now with the emergence, and actually not the emergence, but the professionalization of ESG and the having that be brought into legislation and reporting and these types of things, it's never been more important to manage that data in a meaningful way. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Sander onto stage and we're going to talk all about Rhino.
Yeah, the momentum is here for sustainability solutions, and I'm pretty sure, at least it feels like we've passed the awareness stage. So,
Yeah, I think so. I think as an industry, we're moving towards the more mass adoption of these types of technologies. We still have some cleaning up to do on the early adopters, and what's the value and how do we squeeze the value out of the investments that we've made. And there's some that have tried lots of things and maybe been burned in a number of ways where it didn't do exactly what it was supposed to do, or so those things are cleaning up, and I think it's encouraging to see where we are just a few years after we've all been diving into this space. But why don't we start with an introduction of you and the Rhino team?
so I'm Xander, and I'm responsible for, let's say, international expansion of Rhino. With Rhino, we provide a system to aggregate utility data for commercial real estate. We always explain, for us, it doesn't matter what the asset class is, how old the building is, or where it's geographically located. We can work with our hardware as well as our software to normalize and centralize all utility data. So gas, water, electricity, heat, cold. And we've been in business for approximately 8 to 9 years. Originally founded in Poland, and 2 years ago we decided to make the jump, the international jump. At least Rhino decided, and part of that decision was bringing in me. I opened the Amsterdam office, and from here we are doing the, let's say, Western Europe and soon US as well. Um, Most of our customers are investors in commercial real estate, but we definitely tend to tenants and operators as well. It all depends on whether or not you want to bring down your cost, have insights for facility management, or the other way. The other big problem is solve your compliance problems.
All
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So, I mean, anything meaningful takes time, right? So the fact that you
Hmm.
guys are doing this for 8 years, I think the time in Poland before that mass expansion was all about the technology. It was all about building proper technology, and I think it's important for the audience to know that Rhino is both hardware and software, right? So let's maybe before we get into the value of it all, because I think there's a ton of value around it. Why don't you talk first about the technology itself? How does an implementation look? What does the technology itself look like? And what should a customer expect when they take this journey?
Yeah. So first of all, for a software solution, hardware can always be a headache. I'm sure that a lot of your solution members can relate to that. In our case, we sort of were born out of a hardware design house. So for us, that sort of gap was already bridged, I guess. Meaning we are not OEMing, we are building and designing our own hardware, and the platform and the API and all the software part in our solution was built around that. So even though our core is being a software solution, the hardware sort of naturally came with that. We understand connecting hardware to software. I think that's a key thing in our go-to-market, as we understand all facets from our solution. On top of that, I guess key to note is we are not a smart metering company. So there are a lot of solutions out there bringing smart meters to the industry or to the market. The downside of that is that it takes a retrofit for an existing building, and that's always comes with a high capex, and a lot of our customers don't, I guess, take that into account when deciding whether or not to want to retrofit or acquire a new asset. What we do is we go in with a gateway, and that connects to the existing meters, whether they're dumb or smart. Most probably we can connect to it and aggregate that data. And that comes with a relatively low investment need, while still being able to collect that data and send it to our cloud, where I guess the magic happens.
Okay.
So we're, from a, let's say, ecosystem perspective, we're right in the middle, right? In the bottom layer is the building, the asset itself. The top layer is the front end. We can position our own hardware. We can deliver our own platform, but our data can be consumed in the other platforms as well. And we can collect the data through other hardware or software as well.
Yeah, nice. And so then you capture all of this this incredible data from the meters. What's the point, right? So you have all of these smart meters that are starting to emerge. Why go with Rhino? Why is it unique, and why is it interesting to do?
Well, those are a few questions simultaneously. I guess what makes us unique is that we can combine hardware and software, and it really doesn't matter what the asset class is, where it's geographically located, or how old the building is. A logistics park is a completely different asset compared to an apartment complex or even an office building. So there are so many variables to take into account, but because we can combine software and hardware, we are very flexible. But why would you need this data? You want to have insights, right? You need to bring down your costs. You need to bring down your carbon footprint. You want to automate part of your operation and do more with less people. There are various reasons to go with a solution like this. And what we see is that even from a competitor perspective, global customers, enterprise customers, still on a regional level, every once in a while can choose for a competitor. But then on a global level, they still want one point of contact, one API to process, whether that's in their own data lake or in their centralized ESG platform. And we can deliver that. We can simplify things.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, I imagine for the different countries, we're at different phases of smart meters, right? And then we're at different phases with energy versus water versus heating versus whatever. And this is actually quite a nice solution to get all of them at the same time and at a very detailed level. And the
Yes,
other,
definitely.
uh, and speak a little bit to the utility companies themselves. You know, I think you often can get your monthly overview of how much you spent, and here's your bill. And a lot of buildings, right? They'll take that bill and they'll just divide it by the amount of tenants, and that's how they divide the cost. But yeah, speak to the openness of that model versus what you guys are seeing in your case studies.
Yeah, splitting the total consumption by the number of tenants is sort of an outdated way of working. Even if you take into account the square meters that they use, it's not a fair system. And if you want to be able to, I guess, bill your multi-tenant assets, bill your tenants, you need to of course have the accurate data. We've got within the logistics space, global investor in logistics. There's this warehouse where they have 5 tenants, and they used to split it by the square meters that each tenant was using, and then they rolled out our system. And the utility bill went down for 4 of those tenants, and one went drastically up. Well, to the
Yeah.
surprise of everybody, but most were happy, and even those who weren't too happy, at least it's fair now, and you see similar patterns across regions happening and across asset classes as well right now, because of course it was all ignited a few years ago when the war in Ukraine all started and the energy prices went up. Now the energy price went down and they stabilized, but the need is still there, and it's partly because it became part of our, I guess, way of thinking, but of course, very much driven because of the sustainability regulations, right? Europe is definitely, I don't know if they're a front runner, but they are definitely running. And across the globe, you see similar regulations. In the United States, not every state or every city is as progressive as Europe, but there are definitely cities and regions that are going even further. Think of the local law 88 and 97 in New York. They all push for sustainability measures, and it all starts with data. If you don't start measuring, there's no way of knowing if you are creating a nice trend towards being climate neutral.
Yeah, and I think it was a really interesting model, splitting the bill across your tenants when all those businesses in your building were operating in a similar way, right? Back in the day, it was typewriters, where you would nobody was even using electricity. But I think it's the real need to do that differently now is based on that computing power of each of these businesses. Each business is computing completely differently than each other, and some businesses have data centers and AI engines that they need to maintain. Yeah, that energy cost is going to be tremendously different than their neighbor who's not doing that. So it is important that we get down into that granular level, and now we have to, in a way, because otherwise it's just not fair. So really interesting. And what do you guys? So if I you guys recently got your solution certification with us, which is absolutely awesome. Congratulations. And what we do is we go through kind of the model of SBC, right? Where we talk about building usage, building performance, building environment, safety and security, user experience and collaboration. And I think for Rhino is such a specific solution that I think you guys are really supporting the building performance module. But I think you can also drive a lot of value for usage and how owner, a manager can manage their asset based on how it's being used. So what I'd like to do is kind of speak first about building usage. How does this data, what are you seeing in some of your case studies about how customers are using this data to manage better how the asset is being utilized?
Well, there are a lot of nice examples, but I guess one of the main drivers in having this real-time data across your portfolio is that within the B2B space, you don't pay for your usage, right? You pay for the bandwidth that you need on the net. So we as consumers, we get our utility bill, we pay it, and then at the end of the year, you get some money back or you have to pay some extra. But as a business, you need to pay for your peak consumption, so the bandwidth that needs to be reserved on the net for your business, even if that peak happens once a week or even once a month or a few times per year. So if you bring down your consumption, but your peak stays the same, your utility bill won't be changed too drastically, and you want it to be changed too drastically. So you want to bring down your peak. That means you need real-time data. And that goes for any real estate owner, even if you just own one asset. But it sort of doubles down when you own multiple assets, because this asset can be connected to that utility provider, that asset can be connected to the other utility provider, or even in a different country. You want to monitor your peak consumption because only then you can bring it down. Let's say the peak always happens, and that on that day in the week, on that hour, zoom in on that moment in time and split it because you got your sub-metering set up, and then you understand, okay, if we spread it out a little bit, if we turn off that machine, then you can bring down your peak. And that's when the cost saving sort of happens. We've got this also logistics example where the driveway for the trucks was heated for the winter. This was in the Netherlands. Now, it doesn't freeze too often, right? The ice skating doesn't happen every year, but the heating was still on for 365 days a year.
Oh, wow.
And nobody knew, right? The guy who turned the switch on left the company a bunch of years ago. Nobody was aware of this. And then you set up a system like this, and you understand what the consumption is and where it comes from, and then you turn it off. And it doesn't even take any controlling entity in the solution, right? It just engage your user with the data, and you already understand what the low-hanging fruits are and bringing it down. We've got another example of a student housing, 200 students, student apartments in one building. The students are paying their utility bills, their service, including utilities. So there's no financial incentive to change habits. Nonetheless, the owner, the landlord, started engaging their tenants with the consumption data. No financial incentive, and still the consumption went down by 8 or 9%, just by showing what they are doing. And the list of examples goes on, but
well, and I think that's that generation, right? I think that generation does want to mean well for the environment and support these kinds of initiatives. So amazing what you can actually do by just socially making that data available and showing people kind of their impact on different aspects. And so if I move to the performance area, because then you're talking more about the sustainability and the ESG, let's go with the different utilities that you guys manage. Are they all created equal in what you're saying? Like I imagine the peak moments is very much about energy consumption. Do you see that also with the other utilities similarly?
Well, it's not exactly the same, but
how do they
there are
differ?
definitely different applications, right? The use case is slightly different. For instance, for water and gas, leak detection is super relevant. Having a gas leak is obviously quite dangerous, but even a water leak can cost a lot of money. And setting up the right alarms and notifications can help managing a building way better. Just imagine you've got a water leakage in the basement, and the facility manager goes down in the basement 2 or 3 times a year. Setting up a system like this definitely can save a lot of money. Yeah.
allows you to capture things in real time rather than on a monthly basis. Because if you're just basing it on the
Exactly.
monthly utility bill, you can never get down into that granular level of what's actually playing minute by minute. Yeah, yeah, really interesting. And then you guys are now plugging into the ESG craze, I think, the ESG reporting and everything that needs to happen around that. How should we see that? Are you working with partners on that? Are you doing that on your own?
Yes. So actually, customers are finding us as a way to automate ESG data within their existing ESG platforms. An example is DeepKey. We've got a global customer, and they are a customer of DeepKey, and they are manually adding ESG data, needed data for the ESG reporting into DeepKey. And then they found us and said, "Hey, is there any way we can automate the gas, water, electricity consumption? Because that's quite a large piece of the puzzle." And yes, we can do that. So now DeepKey integrated our API, and we are automatically pushing our data within the platform. And that's not for the complete portfolio. It's quite a huge portfolio and would take many years of rollout. But slowly but surely, we are adding assets on a country level. So now there are less humans, less consultancy hours needed in getting the right data in, and the error rate obviously goes down because it doesn't take a human.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. And the EU taxonomy and CSRD, these are legislated frameworks that the biggest companies already need to start to report on these aspects. So it's good to, we always say it's good to get ahead of the curve, get that data in order so that when the directive gets down to your level, you're ready for it, right? I think that's a really, really important piece. So where is the so that I'm just going to jump right into the financials then, because I think on one side you're getting a ton of efficiency from getting rid of some of those consultancy man hours and the different ESG and reporting frameworks that are required. But where else are people getting the return, and when they take an installation, what kind of return ROI are we looking at when we what's the turnaround time on that investment?
By average, our customers, after the first few months of usage, bring down their utility bills by 20 to 30%.
Oh,
Of
wow.
course, it kind of depends on the asset class because, logistics, warehouse is completely different compared to a residential apartment complex. So the numbers differ per asset class, but across asset classes, approximately 20 to 30%. Now, the cost of the system, it completely depends on the amount of sub-metering needed. There's a big difference in just monitoring the main meter or monitoring each floor, each machine, or etc. But you can imagine if you've got a building with a few €1,000 of utility bills every month, the return on investment is within a few weeks.
Wow.
Again, depending on the number of sub-meters. If you just do the main meter, it won't be a few weeks, a few months. But it's an easy choice.
Yeah. And then it's not only about the technology, right? It's about what you do with that data that actually makes the difference. So how do you all support the organization to actually get the return, right? Because if you put in these meters but you don't actually make any changes, then then you've spent a lot of money and your cost has only gone up in a way. So how do you guys help actually to realize that gain?
So there are a few, let's say, ways where this happens. It kind of depends on the problem that we are solving, because if the problem of our customer was cost reduction, facility management, insights, then the ROI is super important. But if the problem that we are solving is the compliancy problem, the ROI is slightly less important because they sort of need to. Nevertheless, we go to market indirectly. So we've got go-to-market partners, and a lot of our partners are. We've got more ESG consultants than traditional installation companies, if that makes sense. So our partners are, let's say, a layer of consultancy and advisory, helping our customers save money. Next to that, this is sort of future and roadmap speak, but we are definitely working on algorithms and AI to, let's say, take a controlling task from our part as well. So currently we are measuring, and the act part is something that soon will be part of our solutions as well.
So yeah, looking towards automation and giving the feedback
Exactly.
loop where you can actually let the system.
Yeah, go back into the BMS and control.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Really interesting. We have a module within our smart building certification that we call maturity of smart. It's one thing to get insight into air quality or utility management, but it's a whole nother level when those systems start speaking to each other and automating how that building performs. That's really exciting. So do you have a time when you're gonna launch all that?
Nah, if I'm
No.
gonna say anything, my product department is.
Yeah. No, and I had a really interesting talk the other day about AI in buildings, and it's interesting. They say, we need to first get the data. We need to get it. We need to have the data right
Exactly.
first, and then you can start to build AI engines that make sense. But we're so far from that, that initial step of having proper data, that to start to build those engines already is really, really challenging thing.
Yeah, true. But that's I guess the foundation that we've been building, right? We've got buildings connected in almost every country in Europe.
Yeah.
Let's say we've got buildings connected in Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Benelux, France, Portugal, Spain, UK, very soon the US first building, of course Eastern Europe as well. That's where we came from, and we collect 2 million data points per day or so, and we've been doing this for 9 years already. So the foundation of the I guess the data lake of utility data is huge, and building AI on top of that is way easier than the other way around.
Yeah, 100%. So just as a going into your experience from a kind of a European perspective, and moving to the US and going beyond, are you seeing different motivations for smart in these different places, or do you see it the same? What's your experience with the different regions that you're working in?
The European region is quite consistent, right? Because it's
Yeah.
European, it's driven by European laws. The US, there's still a lot for me to discover, but the US is not as consistent as Europe is. Taking local regulations from New York, San Francisco, Denver, Washington, it's completely different than state laws in, let's say, Texas, right? In some parts, ESG is bad wording, and well, in some regions they're pushing for it, especially in urban areas, right? On a
Yeah,
global
that's
scale.
interesting.
Yeah,
That's really interesting in the US. Yeah.
it is. Yeah. So, but still, I mean, even there where ESG is seen as something bad, there's still a need for insights, facility management, cost reduction, and we can cater both type of problems. So, but of course, still a lot to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what's so nice about the Rhino solution is just the simplicity of what it's for and how it gets used. That the value is clear, the insight is clear, and then the bridges it makes to the different reporting initiatives is also very, very clear. So that makes the messaging quite similar, I would imagine, throughout Europe, in the sense that, the motivation is in this utility management. If you look at other smart building technologies, if you look at, occupancy technology or apps, or, these different functions, there's different motivations in different parts of the world, right? We did a trade mission with Japan a few years ago, and we were talking about occupancy sensors, and they were like, yeah, I mean, if the person's not in their desk, they're either, sick, or they're dead. It's not, there's no reason to have
They're
desk
not working from home.
occupancy, So I think it's really, really interesting to try and deal with those different kind of motivations and cultures in navigating these things. But that's what I love about the Rhino solution, that it's the value of it is very clear, and the function of it is very clear. So when you were talking about partners that are ESG partners, do you have other kind of service providers and consultancies that you work with, and who are you looking for now, and who can get in touch with you to support you?
We've got three types of partners: installation companies, consultants, whether they're ESG consultants or energy consultants or in that direction. And we are working with property managers as well.
Okay.
Of course, property managers, there's a clear business case in for them to help the landlord, the investor, in managing those assets, right? It's more than just real estate is more than just a pile of bricks in a location. It used to be that, but it's more. The data around it sort of dictates the future worth of an asset.
Yeah. So how do those three get in touch with you?
Send me an email.
Send you an email. Yeah, they can also get in touch through. We're also happy to make that connection. But yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, very nice. What else do you? What else is playing in your plans now for the next coming months? You going more and more to the U.S.?
We've got a commercial partner for the US, so we will be making that jump this year. Our certifications are almost done. Expecting that this quarter, actually.
Which one are you talking about?
The FCC.
Yeah.
Yeah, and well, growth within Europe, right? I'm not aiming at country, except for US. I'm not aiming at country expansion, except for those countries that we grow in organically through existing customers. But we definitely want to be more present within our existing regions. Yeah.
Yeah. So just keep hammering the drum, getting more
Exactly.
and more customers, showing more and more value. And I have no doubt that this is going to continue to be successful, because it's your track record is amazing, and there's so much to be to celebrate in your journey so far. And we're excited to be a part of it at whatever place we can be in stage. So just to close up, you recently went through the solution certification. Say a little bit about that journey and what you experienced, and how that hopefully is helping your business move forward.
Well, if it's going to help us, we'll notice in the upcoming weeks and months. No, joking. I mean, the fact that it took me months to finalize this and to go through the process sort of says something about the weight of valuing and judging the type of solution that we offer. I couldn't chat GPT myself through the questions. So I think you really drilled down into the different, I guess, details of our solution, both on the hardware side as well as the software side. you're clearly look for not just the value, but the ROI behind that value as well. So yeah, pretty good experience.
Yeah, and one of the things that we spoke about and we harped on was integrations, right? And how to really show how integratable your solution is. But maybe that's a nice way to talk about Rhino closing out is who are you all integrating with, and what are the ones that are really driving value, and what does integration mean to you guys as a company?
I guess integration is we are part of an ecosystem, right? And we there's no value without there's no value in an individual solution if it doesn't operate with the other solutions as well. So integration is a super key part. You can deliver the most awesome sensor, but if it doesn't work with the rest of the ecosystem, you're not part of the ecosystem, and then sort of there's no value in existence. So integrating with, like I said, right, we're right in the middle. For us, integration means that we integrate with all the makes and models of smart and dumb meters, as well as all the utility provider connectors on the back end. And then on the other end, our, let's say, front end, we want to be integratable as easy as possible. There's no way we're going to say to an almost competitor, no, you cannot integrate us, because that's part of our value, yeah. Right? So on the back end, we want to integrate with all the BMSs, all the smart meters, all the dumb meters, all the utility provider connectors. And in the front, we want other solutions to integrate us. So we've got ESG integrations, like with DeepKey. We've got tenant experience platforms that integrated us, so tenants can see their consumption, not compared to an average household in this country of 4 people, but compared to your neighbor, or at least the average neighbor. This compared to your whole apartment building, you are doing 80% of the consumption. So you're doing good.
With the same sun, with the same weather conditions.
Exactly. So now the context of your environment is there, and then it's meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So, you know, one of the things that we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years since we've been doing this is that if we look back 5 years ago, solutions were very specific in what they were capable of doing. And therefore, when you would partner up and integrate with other solutions, you can make yourself just this beautiful smart building, because you have all of the different functionality in partnerships. But what we're seeing is that each one of these solutions is expanding their scope of focus, right? So where you were complementary to each other, you now become competitive to each other in a way, because there's more and more overlap, which is really challenging for the buyer, because the overlap no longer speaks to the specifics of the solution, because everybody has the same kind of marketing, storyline and the same sort of discussion point, which is really hard for them, because those solutions are still very good at what they started with, and they're less good at what they're expanding to. So what is your advice right now to buildings that are trying to navigate this? And, if every one of these solutions has their own, software platform that gives you all the analytics, how do you choose which one to use? And where do you take your smart building when it comes to all of these different, options, I would say?
That's a tough question.
It's a tough question, loaded question, and if you don't answer it well, we'll delete it out of the recording.
No. Of course, I got the answer.
Of course you do.
But the first step is you, a community, right? This is your role to explain each solution's position in the ecosystem. Because for a buyer, it's pretty tough to value or to judge what you need to do. So there's a big role in there for communities like yourself. Second step is for all these solutions to first of all integrate, but also just talk to each other, right? If you cannot explain what the difference is between you and an overlapping but not competing solution, that if we don't understand it, then the buyer will never understand it as well. And then the third step, and this is sort of answering your question, for the buyer, what to do. I don't know how to do it, but what they need to do is they need to do the research in such a way, and they need to choose their solutions in such a way that they're building a puzzle and not a house of cards, right? If you pull one out, because in 5 years from now, half of the solutions won't exist anymore. If you pull one out, the house of cards shouldn't collapse. Now the puzzle should stay the same, and you just plug in a new piece with a new solution. So again, the integrations are key.
Yeah, I love that answer. And I think what's so critical for, our advice to building owners and developers, and actually what we're seeing within the Rhino ecosystem, is that get clear on what you're trying to do with your building and then go look for the solutions to do it, right? So like for instance with occupancy management, I always come back to this because it's one of the ones that's really useful data, but not always clear as to why it's really useful data, right? There's a lot of discussion there and a lot of challenge. So if you're thinking about that as a solution for something you're thinking about, bring a couple of those occupancy companies around a table and say, before I talk about solution, what do I need to be thinking about when implementing occupancy technology and occupancy data? Or bring around user apps. Every user app starts from a different perspective. One starts from community, one starts from financial, one starts from maintenance and management. So bring them around a table and say, what should I be thinking about when implementing this? And then start to say, oh, I really like what that company is saying. Let's continue the conversation, because I think the biggest challenge is that a lot of the dialect and the marketing sounds the same, but when you dive into the guts of it, it's completely different in what they're each doing and trying to do. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Really interesting. Thank you so much for your time, Sander, and just we are so in awe of what Rhino has been able to do in a short amount of time, and we can't wait to see what you guys achieve in the coming years, because I'm sure it's going to just go through the roof. So
Thank you.
thanks for your time, and we look forward to continuing this journey together.
Thanks for having me, Nick.